This is match 3 game 1, and I was against some kind of Bant deck. The matchup felt like pretty terrible because even though like trying to get away from standard for a little bit to like just avoid playing against like Bant piles with Uro in them, I still just can't like get away. So I can't remember if like I played like a Bant control list and a Bant Stoneblade list, and I can't remember which one this was. I think this was the Stoneblade, but yeah, this is like a pretty good hand. Like on the draw, it's like maybe a little bit slow if like my opponent's on like some kind of hyper aggro deck, but I have like discard, push, like all the Lilianas I want, as well as like the lands and colors to cast them. So this is like a definite keep here. But here, like, I think there's a bit of a decision point here of like, should I push the bird, or start lead with the discard? But I just straight up push the bird. Like I have my next turn lined up as like double discard spell, which is pretty strong, and just kind of like avoiding any like free drops coming down too early, which I would be a little hard pressed to deal with because I wouldn't be able to like I could stone raid myself. Like let me start that again. Like I wouldn't be able to deal with them until turn 3 with like a Liliana Edict, which would just get the bird anyway, or having to like crack the Peatland then push the free drop. So just kind of push that off the bat to avoid that. Which obviously I get a little bit punished by the fact that my opponent just plays out the Stoneforge Mystic, but like with double discard, well, not double discard, Thoughtseize, I was kind of more okay with that sequence because I would just be able to like Thoughtseize the Batterskull and then go from there. Oh, oops. Right, that was the wrong button to press, but like I see my opponent is on like some kind of Bant land destruction type thing with the I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, acid moss in like Ghost Quarter and stuff. That comes into it later when they like play 4-mana card. No, both 2 4-mana cards. Khan the Great Creator, I think it is, and start doing like shenanigans with like turning my lands to artifacts and then like upticking on them, so then they just like die. But now this like Stoneforge Mystic's pretty unthreatening because it's just a 1/2. I think I did unfortunately with the Inquisition wind up discarding an Uro, which is like a pretty weak discard target because they just kind of want it in the bin anyway. I can't remember if I win or lose game 1, and like I did just think to myself before sitting down and doing this again, I should like look that up to make sure like I have some note of what happened in the game, but like c'est la vie. But I think this turn's like pretty easy. Just I get to develop a Liliana and like clear the board, and then just have a Planeswalker in play. Although again, like against an Uro deck, the uptick loses a lot of value because it just kind of gets them closer to escaping the Uro. Which I believe they do this turn, which kind of puts me in a pretty bad spot. But like I had to downtick on the Stoneforge Mystic. Well, maybe not. Like I think without the Stoneforge, there was like a chance that they just had fetch and could escape the Uro this turn anyway. But yeah, so they're all like a Bauble. They do Ghost Core to me. Well, I don't have to press OK that, so I'm not sure if I like sequence it later, but just with how like what shenanigans my opponent on, and presumably playing Path as well, there is like I definitely should be mindful of like the lands I fetch and like making sure that I'm fetching my shocks, even if it does cost me the life, before like fetching basics. I do believe I play out the Bauble first and then Bauble myself to try and inform my sequencing, because I see a Field of Ruin on top, so I play out the Last Hope to like yeah, I down tick it straight away, so like it's a bit of an unconventional play here, but I need to draw an answer to the Uro. I know I have a blank on top of my deck. If I hit like a creature off this mill and get to repick it up, that kind of potentially puts me in a better spot than like I would otherwise would have been in. There is like a risk that I just lose my Liliana off the bat, so I think trying to like dig a card deeper, knowing that I have a blank on top of my deck, is kind of like the better way I could sequence it, rather than like upticking it, just like making it a 4/5 when I know that they're going to be attacking one of my planeswalkers next turn. So there's like no need to like just uptick to conserve my life total, which is an interesting spot. I'm not sure if it's like the possible best play, but I think with like knowing that I'm drawing blank next turn and I'm just trying to like get that off the top of my deck so I can like have a draw step plus a Peatland draw to try and deal with this Uro. Well, they do have the Acid Moss. Like Decay was possibly like the best possible draw in the situation, but my opponent is like fairly close to just being able to escape the Uro anyway with like a fetch land off the top. So like, while it's not ideal, it's still okay. But yeah, I think like from this point, I'm kind of forced into having to trade the Quagmire for the Uro, and I'm pretty sure my opponent had a path in hand, so that just kind of stops being a line I can take anyway. Yeah, my opponent just manages to like have everything. I do cycle the Cling on the Fatal Push, just kind of, probably should have been a land, was like the better decision here to like make sure that I'm not like accidentally shrinking my Goyf, but I don't think it really mattered with the target. I do hit a Lurrus, so that kind of gives me some way to start generating some card advantage to do things, but in the face of like Uro drawing 2 cards a turn, as well as like being kind of mana constrained by my opponent stone raining me twice, like this game's running away fairly quickly from me. Yeah, and then like with my opponent having the Scavenging Ooze as well, like Bauble is a play lost on me. But my opponent only has 1 Scavenging Ooze activation up, so I can just immediately cycle this Bauble, then play the Lurrus to make sure I get at least, well, I guess they can just target whatever Bauble I target with Lurrus, so they go for the path on Bauble instead, which possibly like a bit of a missequence on my opponent's part, because they could have just ate the Bauble I was targeting, then pathed the Lurrus next turn, and then just kind of like thoroughly put the boot around my neck, and then just kind of a land off the top as well. At this point, I'm not like, ooh, it was a bit of a hard decision, because like I could So my line of thinking was like I could crack the Bauble to get a card deeper to try and find an answer to the Euro, but at this point in time, my answers remaining, which would have done it, were 2 trophy, only 2 trophy. So I feel like I had more percentage to answer the Euro if I don't draw the card with Bauble, try and naturally draw a Fatal Push, and then crack the Bauble to allow me to push the Euro. I'm not entirely sure like how the percentages work out on that, because I'm not like I don't necessarily know all of them, but just kind of like my brief understanding of kind of like the percentages and like the hypergeo on that like puts natural drawing the push in one natural drawing a push in one draw step slightly higher than trying to draw like 2 of 38 cards with the Bauble. So I'm not entirely sure how correct that was, but I think it slightly edges out in the push's favour in that situation. But yeah, I do get rewarded with that sequencing of drawing the push. So, like, not to be results oriented, but like that line did wind up paying out for me. But now it's just kind of have to Bauble and push the Euro. But my opponent's very close to just escaping the Euro again anyway, so I draw a push for the Ooze, which I don't wind up going for, because again that just puts my opponent on I can never remember how many Euro escapes for. It is 5, so that just puts my opponent like 1 card closer to escaping Euro, so they just effect away from it. Yeah, like I'm at 6 life. There's not really much I can do to come back into this game with my opponent having like 2 cards in hand. I draw a Hexdrinker, which is like okay, but I'm pretty sure they just have the path here. So I go for the level up to try and like have a body which blocks the Ooze, but my opponent waits. No, I do manage to level it up, which is something, but probably isn't enough at this point. Like any Goyf I draw at this point as well is just going to be tiny, so yeah, like very kind of in a bad spot, which I don't really see the way out of, just with having nothing in the yard. Like, so Lurrus isn't a way to get back into it. Like, if there is a way back into it, it is off the back of like a very large Hexdrinker, but or not even a large, like a protection from everything Hexdrinker, but I like with my opponent being at 25, there's like no way I can race a 2/2 at 6 life, so it's just then like my Hexdrinker has to stay on defense, and like eventually my opponent finds some way to escape the Euro again, and that's kind of like just game over. Oh no, yeah, this was like pretty good for me because my opponent played the Khan, so I kind of didn't necessarily put my opponent on like running the Khan package in the sideboard, which while it's like definitely annoying, I'm not entirely sure like how effective it is in my opponent's deck, rather than just like getting to play actual sideboard cards. But my opponent just like fetches some ridiculous artifacts from the sideboard, and like there's no way I can beat an evasive 6/5, which also bolt something. So I just pretty sure I just scoop it up at this point, or maybe like stick out a turn or 2 for like more information. But yeah, I think like I have to draw a trophy this turn, otherwise like that's just the game, and I don't think I do. Yeah, I just draw the Liliana, which like isn't good enough really, so I just scoop this one up. Should I keep doing the thing where I no, I'm just stop and re-record. Alright, but yeah, that was kind of shouldn't be talking into this screen. That was like an unfortunate game. I don't really think there was much I could have done there. Like Uro's just kind of a hard card to beat, and I had maybe there was an argument for like saving the Cling to Dust earlier into the match. Because if they're on Bant colors, I probably should like be aware of Uro. But like I also needed to like to cycle it to get myself out of the situation I was in anyway, where my opponent just managed to like escape the Uro so quickly. So like that was kind of a bit of an unfortunate game. But now like I know they're on like some kind of land destruction Khan Uro deck. Like I can go into game 2 with kind of more knowledge of what I'm up against and like some sideboard cards. Yeah. So like match 3 game 2, I do like wind up taking this one, but it's as you'll see as it like the game progresses, this game just like gets so clowny. So for sideboard cards, I like trim the Liliana because like the down tick seems like a bit of a liability. I brought in my 2 choke, trimmed the Hexdrinker and a Bauble, just kind of make and Unearth. Like with my opponent playing Scoos, Unearth loses a lot of value. And like the Spellbombs try and just contain the Uro. I think like I don't want Ashiok in this matchup, and as well as the Cling to Dust, because like very much like in Standard, like a lot of the thing with the Uro decks is that they're like Uro's the only bit of graveyard shenanigans they've got going on, but they are like very card advantage based with just kind of like off the back of Uro, and there's like other like 3 mana Teferi and just kind of like other things going on as well. So where like a lot of like a lot of graveyard pieces like are also just kind of like card disadvantage in terms of like traditional like fair magic, so to speak. So like even like Cling to Dusting in Uro, sure I get like 3 life out of it, but that only just like puts the life gain on parity with like the first half of the Uro, but that's still like a 2-for-1 in my opponent's favour because I've had to spend a card to remove an Uro, which is already like cycled, drawn a card, and like possibly ramped my opponent. Spellbomb is like okay in that regard because I can spend the mana to draw a card from it and then just kind of maintain parity at that point. But there are like situations where I just have to like crack the Spellbomb without like having the mana up, just in case like my opponent plays an Uro that turn. I think I would have to like crack the Uro, or crack the Spellbomb with the Uro triggers on the stack. I don't quite remember how that works. No, I think I would get priority in response to the Uro going, like cast going on the stack, but it might be like too late to do it then. I definitely know this, but then that's just kind of like another point of like how even instant speed graveyard hate is like kind of bad against Uro because like the sequencing to do it around like you can either like take the graveyard to stop the Uro escape, but then the Uro still remains in there depending on how the sequence plays out. But now I'm on the play for this game. Like the chokes wind up putting in a lot of work, and I kind of see like this hand's possibly a little bit weak, but I have like a push for an early Stoneforge. I have like choke to cheese them up the game, and I have a Dark Confidant to just kind of keep the gas flowing. So like this is definitely maybe on the weaker spectrum of hands, but it's probably like there's no reason to mull this. Like the probably small thing to note, like with how my opponent just like straight up fetched a green source there rather than like trying to bluff the Veil. Probably means that my opponent's just like not on Veil of Summer because they weren't like even thinking about like as a way to bluff that. Because generally like people will like think about like what's in their deck, what's in their opponent's deck, but they won't think about bluffing things outside of their deck. Obviously, like this can horribly backfire on you against like a stronger player who like will be very mindful of that line of play. But there's just kind of a small thing to possibly get an exploitative route if kind of there have been other things in the game to indicate to you that like your opponent is not necessarily the strongest of players. Where it's definitely a bit of a leak in my game, and kind of I believe it's like a big thing going on in poker at the moment of just like if exploitative play is like a thing which you should be mindful of. And then there's like also this whole element of like the way to be exploitative is to play like perfect games, or like in this case like perfect Magic rather than poker. But then like to play truly perfect Magic also incorporates some element of playing exploitative at times. So yeah, that's kind of like a big, very confusing thing. But yeah, no, this turn is just like play out the Dark Confidant and then hope Bob gets me some goodies. But he unfortunately gets immediately pathed off the bat, which sucks, but it's also not unexpected. But with only one blue up, like I don't put my opponent on Spell Pierce, so this gives me a pretty good window to just windmill slam the choke and try and cheese my opponent, as well as like getting to hold up push for whatever my opponent's next, if my opponent like plays out a 2-drop next turn. But draw more land, so I'm definitely at a risk of like flooding out and dying, and then my opponent does have the Utopia Sprawl to like try and circumnavigate the choke a little bit. Yeah, like more land off the top is pretty unideal. I think there is like some consideration for just firing up the Quagmire and like hitting my opponent around with it, especially like as it's safe to do this turn while my opponent's like tapped out. Yeah, you do have to tap the Ghost Quarter to activate it, so that's something to consider, but I'm pretty sure I just kind of go for cracking the Peatland here and then trying to like draw into more action, because while like I do have the choke in play, there is like I don't know, I don't know like if my opponent is like main decking enchantment removal, but with or has like siding in enchantment removal, but like they probably should put a green-black deck on choke, and it seems like a bit of a like misbuilt configuration of their deck with like not having enchantment removal, especially with like how popular Ponza is at the moment. But I guess I'm like slowly, surely learning the format, and then they play a Khan, and this is like from here the game starts to get a bit clowny. I can't remember. I think they fetch Bridge first. Yeah, ensnaring Bridge. So like this, I'm not entirely sure like what happened from like. Well, I roughly know what happened in terms of the game, but just kind of like in terms of playing Magic, this was just like, I guess, a purely modern experience, and it just got a bit clowny from this point. But I did draw an Inquisition to. I did draw an Inquisition. I see they have 2 Skoos in hand, so I actually like don't particularly care about the bridge at this point, because like if anything, like with how much air I have in my hand, which my opponent maybe didn't play out the Skoos, because like with my lack of plays, they probably put me on having just like a buttload of removal rather than just like nothing but lands. So if I had like a different context of hands, the take would like definitely be the bridge, but at this point in time the bridge is like helping me more than hurting me, especially when my component like play out a Skoos, equip it with the sword, and then like put me in a pretty bad spot. So I just take the Sword of Fire and Ice, which is the possibly main route to victory for my opponent this turn, because it just like lets them start. I guess it only does 2 damage, well, and draw a card, so it lets my opponent like start generating more card advantage. Well, I do just, oh yeah, elect to fire up the Quagmire to start pressuring the Khan. And like also hold up push with the knowledge that my opponent has 2 Scavenging Ooze in hand. Oh yeah, I remember now. At this point in the game, I was a little bit reluctant to crack the Peatland, because while it does get me closer to maybe that, like, I am thinking that I want to keep like ways to sack my or activate Revolt just to deal with the Uro, which is going to be coming in a turn or 2, most likely, assuming that my opponent has like some way to get cards into the bin. But my opponent does just play out the Scavenging Ooze, which I do push one off the bat, which I'm not sure if I agree with, because that does like give my opponent closer to Uro, but at this point in time where like I am just got kind of a risk of like dying to like the Skoo's beat down, so it's okay, but I'm not sure if it was the best thing to do in this spot. But I draw a Bauble, so I'm not entirely sure what I should do at this point in time, so I'm pretty sure I just play the Bauble and Bauble myself to see whether or not I should crack the Peatland. Oh wait, no, and then I just realised that like Planeswalker static abilities is a thing, so I can't like even make that line and just crack the Peatland off the mat. And I draw my own Scavenging Ooze here, which is like a pretty good draw because it means I can just like eat their Uro and then go from there. Also don't know anything inside my opponent's hand. So this was like a bit of an interesting spot where I'm not entirely sure what the right move for my opponent would have been, but like I think there is a good argument that my opponent should have like eaten their own ooze at like on their turn just to stop me getting like the point of power, because like my ooze being a 4/4 like definitely becomes like very relevant into the game. But they get the Crucible of Worlds, so this is kind of where things start going a bit awry. But sorry, I had to like pause the recording and like go take care of something quickly. I'm not entirely sure what my last point was, but my opponent just played the like down tick the Karn, putting the Karn in the graveyard to get the Crucible of Worlds, I guess. So this is kind of where the full extent of my opponent's like land destruction plan starts coming to fruition. Like they can just like start looping the Ghost Quarter, and kind of running me out of basics that way. When I only have like not many basics left inside my deck. My opponent also finds a Teferi. They elect to bounce my Ooze here, like over my choke, which I don't know. I guess like they're kind of assuming that I don't have much action in hand anyway. But yeah, they give it the no attacks to the Ooze to protect the Teferi. But I do Bauble my opponent. I wish it was better about. So yeah, I see they just have a Utopia Sprawl on top, so that's like not anything particularly threatening. Stop. I draw a Cling to Dust, which isn't like bad, but it is a redraw, and an Inquisition on top of it as well. Let's see what I do with this turn. I lead with the Inquisition. I see my opponent had a second Ensnaring Bridge, which they drew naturally. So that's kind of good to know that they were main decking it as well as like having it in the Karn board. As well as an Eighth Gust, which is like a bit annoying, but not particularly threatening, as well as like a second Karn, which is probably like the biggest threat out of what my opponent is doing at this point. So I Inquisition. I think I cycle the Cling to Dust here on the Ensnaring Bridge. Mostly just trying to find like an answer to Karn, be it Thoughtseize or an Assassin's Trophy. Like they do have the Teferi in play, but I'm not particularly like with also how much like land destruction shenanigans going on. I'm not particularly inclined to like trade a land for a Scavenging Ooze just to like maybe, or like just on the off chance that my opponent lets the fairy die anyway. So yeah, I just like kind of like play out the ooze here. Presumably eat their ooze and play out a Blooming Marsh. So this does let like my opponent eat my Cling to Dust, but like there is maybe some consideration to like waiting till my opponent's tapped out, like Cling to Dusting a thing, and then like escaping it immediately in the same turn. But that's kind of like a bit of a weak sequence in a large investment of mana just to like draw 2 cards. But yeah, I didn't have anything else going on, and just replaying the Scoos. I probably should like be in a position where I like can start pressuring the Khan and the Teferi, but that is also something else to consider. Just like whether 2 fresh cards would be better than just replaying the ooze and eating an ooze. I'm pretty sure, yeah, my opponent gets liquid metal coating, so like the game just kind of goes full Clownfest at this point. My opponent can't untap any of their lands. I'm gonna like be losing all my lands. I guess this is just like peak Modern experience, I guess. But I draw a Goyf, which is like possibly amongst some of the better draws in my deck here. Let's kind of see. I know this was like a bit of a brain fart. Like I just completely forgot that they had the Crucible in play, so I was kind of like wanted to force the action of them like cracking the Ghost Quarter, I guess. But realistically, I probably should have like targeted the Temple Garden or something, just kind of like take them off mana. But then they could just replay it anyway, so like doesn't really matter. It was just kind of a very slight mistake because I forgot how Crucible Worlds work. But oh yeah, and then it also gives my opponent the opportunity to like gust my ooze in response to like the library search. So I just kind of like wind up losing the ooze here for like no good reason. Which again, like I had a lot of sloppy play in this league, which didn't like wind up mattering anyway. But it's just kind of like stuff like that with like I wasn't really thinking about how the Aether Gust Field of Ruin interaction worked, which I probably should have been like on my mind because it's not like an exactly new interaction to me, but I guess yeah, no, like which worked out okay because that gave me an opportunity to like play the Goyf rather than my opponent like gusting and then ghost quartering me. So like maybe that's what was on my mind, but I'm not entirely. I doubt it because like against an Uro deck, I think the ooze has like more value than a Tarmogoyf. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. I think if I was like mindful of how that sequence would play out to resolve the Goyf, it would have been an okay sequence if I was actually like intending for that to happen. But where I just kind of like accidentally did that, I think that makes this like more of a mistake because I could have like it worked out for me here. But yeah, if it was an intentional play, it would have definitely been like an acceptable, strong one. Say if I did it like post combat after like swinging at the Khan to force a response. But just yeah, no, it's just kind of weak and most likely a mistake, which worked out like a happy accident. Yeah, but my opponent gets to play the liquid metal coating. I'm like, my last basic's gone, so the Ghost Quarter starts like actually being a Stone Rain, and now like they just start getting able to chip away at my lands, but it's not producing like it's not like the worst thing in the world because I do have the choke in play, but like we're both at a spot where we can't like really accomplish much from this point onwards. But yeah, second Teferi is like a bit of an issue, because I do get to like bounce my Goyf and just remove my ability to pressure their planeswalkers. But like, I think Goyf is along the lines of the best possible draw here. So yeah, I just get to like play out 2 Goyfs and go from there. I'm leaving the fetch uncracked just in case I like draw a push, they play an Uro, and then like give me more ways to remove the Uro. But yeah, now my opponent's found a bridge, so like the lands don't untap, my lands are just slowly disappearing into the ether. Welcome to Modern, I guess. But I drew a trophy for the bridge, which was like pretty great. I managed to get rid of the car and stop the like getting stone range shenanigans, which I don't know, like I think there's like no I skipped through that turn because I wasn't expecting anything to happen really, but there's like no other consideration other than apart from trophying the bridge. If they didn't have the bridge in play, I think I would feel pretty tempted to trophy their forest just to completely take them off blue mana. But again, like I can't really win with the bridge in play, and like I'm eventually gonna like run out of lands through like the whole Karn liquid metal coating shenanigans going on. And on top of them like looping the Ghost Quarter, I'm now like out of basics, so but yeah, from this point onwards, I'm in like a fairly commanding position of the game. Like I have Goyf, so now I like finally found the Liliana, so like I can't remember if yeah, I'm pretty sure I just Edict the Scooze here because I want to start like getting the Teferi, although I do wind up, and it also grows my Goyfs, I do wind up sending both Goyfs to the Teferi because it's very close to just drawing my opponent a card, and I would like much rather guarantee the Teferi dies than 6 points of damage, which with the pace of this game, as well as my opponent being like as well as me having like twice as much clock as my opponent in game 2, like I was kind of very yeah, I sent both to Teferi. Like, was kind of aware that clock damage is also a possible route to victory because my opponent seems to be playing just like a slow deck in general and like kind of dirtily. So like timer is a definite like win condition against this starter deck, I feel. I can't remember what does my opponent fetch with the Stoneforge here. I think they're like running out of swords at this point, or must be close to running out of swords because no, did I take no? I Thoughtseized the Batterskull last game, but in this spot, I'm not particularly afraid of Batterskull because like my Goyfs are bigger than it, at least for the time being. Yeah, my opponent just gets to hard cast the Batterskull from hand. I think I wind up drawing a trophy next turn. Oops, sorry. Oh, that's unfortunate. I'm gonna have to like edit that bit out, but there's also a passive on the floor. Well then, I should probably also clean that at some point. Fuck me. Yeah, I wind up drawing the Pulse to answer the Batterskull, so like that's kind of along the lines of like some of my best draws in the spot. I still get to kind of keep working the Liliana, and now my opponent is like one turn away from lethal, and I don't think they like have a draw which can escape this, so they just wind up scooping the match, and then on to game 3, which was pretty interesting, but I do, like, spoiler alert, just wind up winning on timer. That's not the next match. Yeah, I pretty much keep the sideboard the same for this match, like where I want some amount of Spellbomb, and maybe there is like an argument for like taking out the Ashiok on the draw just because I can't like I have less chance of like cheesing out their fetches, but I don't know, it seems kind of small and remote in where I'm like, but yeah, this hand's like pretty amazing. Like double discard, Goyf, like what more, and Liliana, like what more could you want in your life? But yeah, I see double gust sword, so like easy take is just taking the sword here. Like gust is like kind of a 1-for-1, but I also like get to guarantee draw the card which they like target with it next turn anyway. Yeah, like my opponent has a lot of mana from this point. With like double sprawl on the forest, so I'm like less likely to be able to like cheese them off blue mana this game. But yeah, I think I just go like drawing another land. I think I just go for the discard here because there is like just playing a Goyf was just like gonna get it juggled for a couple of turns. Oh no, I lead on the Goyf. Okay, because there is like just some chance that it gets like juggled for a couple of turns by gusts, which does buy my opponent some amount of time. But yeah, that's completely fine. I can just like re-put it on top, like Inquisition, their other gust this turn, and then be in a pretty good spot. But I do just like ram out the Liliana because like my opponent has like no way to interact with the Planeswalker. I know they have a gust in hand. So I just kind of like get to be in this spot. I'm not entirely sure what I pitch here. I think it's just the land, but maybe. No, I do pitch the Inquisition. I guess that makes sense because my opponent only has 2 cards in hand. I know one of them is an Aethergust. So like Inquisition's not the strongest here. And like with how I'm gonna have, yeah, no, that makes a lot more sense because then I can just be at 4 mana in double spell next turn. So the Aethergust is like not very effective anyway. Because I still like get to leave a threat in play. And like yet another Goyf is just kind of perfect here. I start the Liliana uptick. I'm presuming I pitch a Goyf here. I think if like my opponent wasn't on an Euro deck, it would obviously be the Scavenging Ooze, but because they are, like Goyf is a fine pitch here. And my opponent loses the Aethergust, which makes me think that they drew a path or something, because that's the only card which is like better than Gust in this situation, which they would like be willing to pitch. Like if it was like a Stoneforge or something, they would have like played it last turn. So yeah, I fetch shock the Overgrown Tomb because like there is some pressure on my basics in this matchup. Just to be kind of insulated against that is like where I want to be. But yeah, my opponent does have the path. Should path my skews, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I get a little bit ramped. And I like, as I said, was aware of them having a path in hand because it's the only card like better than Aethergust, which they wouldn't have played last turn. Or maybe it would be like a Planeswalker or something, but I'm pretty sure with how much mana they had, they would have just like developed the Planeswalker anyway. So yeah, my opponent does find an Uro, which is like pretty terrifying in this spot, but maybe it was a bit of a mistake, like not down ticking on the Birds of Paradise and then planning to like down tick on the Uro next turn. But I feel like I can pretty easily go for an uncontested Liliana ult, so like that just seems too strong not to do. So my opponent finds Uro into Scavenging Ooze. Like, there's one thing I need to like look up or read up on with like how to make Liliana piles better, because like I'm not entirely sure. So like obviously like the Uro has to go, and that's about it. And then like it's one of those, I'm not entirely sure in the terms of pile making how to balance it, because I'm pretty sure I could have got like a better pile where I just like do that, but instead in this situation I just put everything against Uro, because like I have like, again, I was unsure like what the best way to sort the pile was, and like Uro was the one card which like I needed gone. So I guess with how my opponent played out the Ooze before the Uro, going for the down tick Liliana twice plan was like actually worse in regards of getting rid of the Uro, but I still feel this was like the pile I had to make, but I could have potentially made a stronger pile in terms of like removing my opponent's permanents. So I do remove the Uro, which is like my ultimate goal in this spot though, so and as well as like just getting to Ooze as well, I think it was maybe a slight mistake here, like not immediately oozing my own Tarmogoyf, because yes, it would have shrank my Goyf, but my opponent was going to have like enough mana to compete over it next turn with their own Ooze. But I don't think my opponent, if I remember right, my opponent like didn't eat my Tarmogoyf with their Ooze, which I like was probably a mistake on their part. So it didn't like necessarily matter, but just kind of one of those tightening up, screwing up the nuts and bolts of my play is a thing which I want to be. Oh wait, no, they did go for it, but I just sequenced in a way. Yeah, no, okay, that kind of makes sense. Where I get to like take them off white mana here, which is a bit odd that my opponent's like not playing basic planes in their deck, but. My opponent plays out a second Scavenging Ooze. I think I draw a blank in this turn. I draw the choke. So from this point on, I just decide to get aggressive. Like I just would like to send the Tarmogoyf, but I don't like. It's a pretty like smaller than the Ooze at this point. So trading like one Goyf, one Ooze is like not amazing in this spot. So I just decide to like send in with the Scavenging Ooze and just take the 2-for-1. As and my opponent does oblige with the double block on the Scavenging Ooze. There is like a bit of a concern that like my opponent is just like has an Uro in hand, or like trying to draw to an Uro as I want out. But I still think like attacking with the Ooze and like taking the double block in the situation is fine, especially when I have like the ability to eat like most of their graveyard and then like slam the choke. So especially kind of like doing it that way incentivizes them to tap their breeding pool to like make the choke actually take them off mana. So yeah, like maybe like a slightly different way I could have like spent that, but I'm also like it's very much within my interests to yeah. So either they drew the Uro or had it in hand, which kind of would make sense, but yeah. I'm not entirely sure how like the game would have played out from this point because I was like starting to flood pretty badly, but well, my opponent having an Uro but only like a minute left, so I draw a second choke, which is like a pretty bad draw, but I still like managed to get to play the second choke, and just in case my opponent like had something like a claim or something, I can't get around. My opponent fetched Trading Post, which I guess makes sense because then they can like you know, like start just discarding cards to like try and bring back the Uro, but I don't know. I don't know if this is like a real deck or a brew, but it just kind of felt like my opponent had like too many threads going on at once because they're like doing like a Bant Stoneblade thing with like the Khan package on top, and it just seems like decks game plans are kind of like a bit at odds with each other because like on one hand they're trying to like beat down with like swords equipped to things and like batter skulls and such, but on the other hand they're also playing this like artifact control game with like main deck bridges as well as like the ability to fetch bridges and such. So I don't know, it seems like the deck's kind of like got a lot going on, and just like not having a consistent game plan was like probably working against my opponent in this regards, because if they just like draw a bunch of Stoneforge Mystics and like yeah, like I didn't have anything else to do but where like my opponent was like being pretty dirtly, it just kind of like they got choked and then like taken out of the game. But yeah, so like that was match 3, game 3, and like I don't know, I feel like I was in like maybe not the worst spot possible in this game, where I was just kind of like a few draw steps away from like drawing a threat and being in a very good position, but like timer damage with how far behind my opponent was from like playing slow in like games 1 and 2. So I'm definitely like seeing how like playing like I wouldn't even say like fast or anything. I play like at a reasonable pace and just kind of like having an idea of like how the turns should shape out and only reacting when like things deviate from that. Um, is like definite to my advantage in like regards to clock management and such. So yeah, I guess we'll get